Can Spencer Lee actually bonus his way to an NCAA championship this year? Let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to Big Ten Tuesday here on the Fanco Wrestling YouTube channel, where we like to discuss everything going on in the world of wrestling, but specifically today, the Big Ten and the Spencer Lee situation. This is a topic that I've seen circling all around the internet, in the comments, on message boards, is can Spencer Lee actually bonus his way to an NCAA title this year? His third NCAA title. And I will be going into all of his upcoming opponents and kind of how he's done against those guys in the past. But first, before I get into that, I want to ask you, is over or under a 70% chance that Spencer Lee will bonus his way all the way to the NCAA title this year? Over or under 70% chance? Comment below. Now, Spencer Lee is the two-time NCAA champion, the 125-pounder out of Iowa, number one best pound-for-pound wrestler in the entire country this year, the recent Hodge Trophy winner. And he is, just going to have a phenomenal season. I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do this season, and especially the fact that now he could become a four-time NCAA champ. That was an opportunity that we weren't sure we were going to get to see Spencer Lee because of the NCAA championships being canceled last year, but now there's so much excitement around the Iowa Hawkeye. He's on a 24-match win streak right now, 18-0 last season, with a nearly 90% bonus point percentage. And that didn't just start last year, right? In his freshman year, he had a 75% bonus point percentage and continued by a 73% in his sophomore year, and last year a nearly 90%. So absolutely unbelievable statistics for Spencer Lee. But who are some of his upcoming opponents? Well, first of all, his season started off this past weekend against Liam Cronin of Nebraska. He pinned him in the first period in a bar. What a match, what an entrance for Spencer Lee coming into the first matches of the 2021 season, and what a welcome into Carver Hawkeye Arena, beating a top 15 ranked opponent by pin. So who does he have upcoming next? Well, Spencer Lee has Patrick McKee of Minnesota on the upcoming schedule, who he has not wrestled yet. The next couple of upcoming opponents he hasn't wrestled, between Justin Cardani of Illinois, Patrick McKee of Minnesota, and Dylan Ragusin of Michigan. And there's some interesting things about Ragusin that I want to say in just a second. But as far as Patrick McKee goes, McKee himself lost to Brandon Meredith from Penn State by a 3-2 score at the first round of the Big Ten championships. But the interesting thing about McKee is that, although he does have that loss on his schedule from last year, that's somebody who Spencer Lee has actually beat in the past by a bonus point, by tech fall. McKee actually just recently beat Rayvon Foley of Michigan State. So that's a very interesting thing that, he's kind of made some interesting improvements in this past year. The other guy who's upcoming on the schedule is Cardani. Now, although these two haven't wrestled, Cardani, a top 15 opponent out of Illinois, Spencer Lee has had some common opponents, including Medley. So Spencer Lee has actually teched Medley in the Big Ten semis last year, and Medley, the previous round, had actually beat Cardani by a score of 9-4. So some common opponent matchups there, and Cardani ended up finishing at the bottom of the Big Ten bracket last year. Now, Dylan Ragusin, who I mentioned already, Ragusin is an interesting guy in this Big Ten schedule, and the reason I say that is because they haven't wrestled yet, but Ragusin has just kind of been on a tear recently. He has been somebody who's just jumped into the rankings at the beginning of the season, and for good reason. He pinned Nick Aguilar of Rutgers in the first match of the season, majored King Sandoval of Maryland, as well as beat Brock Hudkins recently of Indiana. Now, I don't know that he'll be able to stand a chance against Spencer Lee, but maybe he could be one of those guys that could keep it to at least a decision. I don't know. What do you think about Ragusin against Spencer Lee? Now, somebody who Spencer Lee has wrestled, who's upcoming on the schedule, is Malik Heinzelman, a top 25 ranked opponent out of Ohio State. Spencer Lee wrestled him actually at Midlands last year, and he pinned him in the first period. So he pinned him in the past at Midlands in the first period. So that's an opponent that Spencer Lee will obviously be looking to do the same thing to the next time they wrestle. The next guy is somebody Spencer Lee has wrestled multiple times and has actually beat him by bonus point multiple times, and that's Devin Schroeder. Spencer Lee teched him and majored him in the Big Ten duel last year, as well as the Big Ten championship. So they have wrestled in the past, and Spencer Lee has taken it to him both times. I think Schroeder is, to be honest with you, Schroeder is somebody who I think is kind of underrated in a lot of the rankings and even in the Big Ten championships. Big Ten finalist last year, but Schroeder going up against Spencer Lee, maybe he can kind of learn from his mistakes in the past, and by that he may be able to hold off the major decision or bonus points. I think that is definitely something that is possible, but Spencer Lee is just taking it to him twice in the past, and we'll be looking forward to doing it again this year. The next guy, the big rival in teams is Spencer Lee and is Iowa and Penn State. Now, unfortunately, Spencer Lee hasn't had any big Penn State opponents at 125 pounds. Unfortunately, I really wish that there were better matches there, but he beat Brandon Meredith last year in the duel. He beat him by a score of 16-1. I mean, absolutely beat up on Brandon Meredith, who is a top 20 ranked opponent this year for Penn State. So we'll see how he does this year. As far as Northwestern goes, who is another upcoming opponent for Spencer Lee, he has not wrestled Michael D'Agostino. He almost wrestled him at Midlands last year. I was looking forward to that match because D'Agostino actually had a very good Midlands tournament, but Spencer Lee actually pulled out by medical forfeit last year due to a couple of things going on with him, so we didn't get that match. Now, he did make the Big Ten semis, but he actually lost to Schroeder, who we just recently talked about. Devin Schroeder lost to him by a score of 6-0, who, Spencer Lee did end up teching and beating by beating by bonus points in the Big Ten championship. So, D'Agostino is pretty tough. He battled back for third place, so he's still somebody who will be an opponent for Spencer. But will he be able to beat him by not be beat by bonus points? I don't know. Now, there's a couple guys I want to talk, or one more guy I want to talk about before we get into the Big Ten championships and what could actually happen there. So, Eric Barnett of Wisconsin, these two have not wrestled, but the one thing I do want to say is that Aguilar has beat Barnett 6-0 at the Big Ten championships in the first round. And Spencer Lee has actually pinned Nick Aguilar. So that kind of brings us into the Big Ten championships, because there are a couple guys who may appear on the schedule who Spencer Lee has actually will not have wrestled in the regular season. So one of those is Nick Aguilar of Rutgers, who he actually did wrestle last season in the dual meet. He pinned him in last year's dual meet, Nick Aguilar. Now, obviously, it's not the picture right here. I'm just showing a picture of Spencer Lee in the graphic right here. That's the most recent photo from the Nebraska duel. But I do want to talk about somebody who has come back this year after a redshirt year, and that's Rayvon Foley. Now, you may or may not know this, but Spencer Lee has actually pinned Rayvon Foley twice. Rayvon Foley recently was the number 2 ranked guy at 125 pounds, but Spencer Lee has pinned him first in the 2018 Big Ten championships, and then in the first period he actually beat him in the 2018 duel. So he pinned him twice in the same year. Now that was 2018, so obviously take that with a grain of salt, because Rayvon Foley has improved since then. Recently, with that loss to that loss to Patrick McKee, not really showing a great season so far, but it's early on. Things can definitely change. The other guy who Spencer Lee hasn't wrestled, who he could wrestle at Big Ten, is Brock Hudkins of Indiana, as well as King Sandoval, who we have to look at losses too, and how Spencer Lee could do against these guys. Sandoval has recently lost multiple times by bonus point. So that kind of shows that Spencer Lee can score bonus on these guys. Whereas Brock Hudkins is actually somebody who may have some losses on his resume, but he actually only has, I believe it's one loss by bonus point. That was one of his first matches that he's ever wrestled in college. So he may be the guy to hold Spencer Lee to a potential decision. I don't know. What do you think? Then we get to the NCAA championships, and this is where things get super interesting, is the NCAA championships with some guys who are also top 25 ranked guys at 125 pounds. You look at Jacob Camacho from NC State, Brandon Courtney from Arizona State, Drew Hildebrand of Central Michigan, Alex Mackel of Iowa State, as well as Sam Latona of Virginia Tech. Now, Spencer has actually wrestled a couple of these guys. He has teched Mackel and Hildebrand. So, I mean, that's the craziest thing, is that Spencer Lee has teched pretty much everybody. I mean, everybody he's wrestled on this list, he has beat by bonus points. So everybody who's actually wrestled, he's beat by bonus points, which just blows my mind. Now, he hasn't wrestled Camacho, Courtney, or Latona, the freshman. But to be honest with you, I think the guy who stands a very good chance is Jacob Camacho, just because, you know, I've liked kind of watching him wrestle in the ACC. Did great at ACCs last year, but he does kind of have that, like we talked about, like how he does in matches in the past. He has been pinned twice. And we know that Spencer Lee looks for those pins. He gets that tilt. He gets the bar. Like, he's somebody who goes for the pin. So, you know, with showing that a guy has been pinned in the past, I mean, it's not necessarily like you're going to get pinned in the future, but like it is a small indicator. So, now, the other guy, too, I mentioned on this list is Brandon Courtney, who Spencer hasn't wrestled in college, but he did actually tech him in a freestyle match. He beat him within, like, the first minute, 10-0, but that was back in 2015, back before Brandon Courtney even got, like, a bunch of training at Arizona State. So, obviously, there are some things there. So, is it possible that Spencer actually bonuses his way based on these, based on these statistics, based on these matches that I've kind of read off? Yeah. I firmly believe that Spencer Lee can major tech or pin his way to his third NCAA championship. I think it's very possible. I think that there are some guys that could be standing in his way, but I also think that it's kind of a game to Spencer at this point. He is a dominant wrestler who will continue to dominate against guys like this at 125 pounds. Now, if you like this video and want to see more like it, I recommend that you maybe support the Fanco Wrestling Patreon page. This is a great way to not only support the channel in great upcoming videos in the future, but also to get exclusive behind-the-scenes content and updates about everything going on with Fanco Wrestling. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you over on Patreon.